Lindsey Graham is co-author of one of those bills, and he joins me now from Washington. Welcome, Senator.
Thank you.
All right, so you heard the news. Robert Mueller impaneling a grand jury, which means this is a criminal probe now, not just a counterintelligence probe. Have you seen so far, as you've watched this story unfold, any crimes that have been committed?
No, not yet. I haven't seen any evidence of collusion either. So the president's right in terms of the Russian probe. There's no evidence suggesting that he or his team colluded yet, but they did interfere in our election. That's not a hoax. That's real. And we'll see if there's any collusion or any other misconduct.
All right. Now, you followed the story the last couple of weeks. The president's anger directed at the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions,
right,
because he recused himself
right,
from the Russia probe. Has that now dissipated? I know you were going to meet with the president this week. Is he now calmed down a bit and Sessions going to stay in the job?
Yeah, I think so. I think a lot of us rallied to Jeff's side because he had no choice. You know, you can't investigate the campaign you're a part of. There are Department of Justice regulations about recusal, and it expressly says if you're a principal in a campaign that's under investigation, you have to recuse yourself. So Jeff had no other choice, and in December, nobody realized that there'd be an investigation of the Trump campaign. So Jeff did the right thing. We all rallied to his side. I think the president's going to keep him where he's at. He's a good attorney general, very loyal to the president. Excellent attorney general.
All right. Now, one of the concerns was that if the president did dismiss Jeff Sessions, he would then go on to hire somebody or appoint somebody who would fire Robert Mueller. What would happen, in your view, if the president fired Robert Mueller?
Well, if it was without cause, it'd be holy hell would break out. I said that about Jeff. I can only imagine how the country would react if Robert Mueller were fired just because the president liked the investigation. Now, if you show me a reason why he should be fired, then somebody else will be appointed in his stead. So my legislation is pretty simple. If Robert Mueller is fired, you're going to have a 3-judge panel to review the firing to see if it meets the criteria of the Department of Justice regulations. I have no indication the president's going to fire Mueller. His lawyer said today, here recently, that they want to get this over with as quickly as possible. They're going to cooperate with the investigation. So Mr. Cobb has got the right attitude about how to deal with Mueller, I think.
Okay. Now, there's some people who are worried about your legislation that, in fact, if you get judges interjecting themselves into a presidential decision about who is a subordinate, let's face it, the prosecutorial power of the Justice Department reports up through the AG through to the president. That's the executive president's. That's a presidential power under the Constitution. Does that bother you? Well,
that's a really good question. So my approach is a bit different. Senator Tillis and Coons, they have an approach that says the judges can reinstate a fired special counsel.
Okay.
Well, I think that is an executive decision. My legislation says judges can review based on existing regulations and law whether or not it was proper, and I think that's the right check and balance.
Well, you mean so the review would be they can comment on it, they just can't reinstate. Is that the difference?
Yeah, they can't reinstate. They can make a decision that it was didn't meet the criteria of dismissal. Then the political system would take over after that.
All right, yeah, it would be essentially a political check and balance. Let's talk about your health care bill. You're trying to do a Hail Mary here on health care after the failure of the Senate, you and Senator Cassidy of Louisiana. I know you came to meet us this week to talk about it. I went and worked the phones a little bit and talked to some of your colleagues, and I have to tell you, Senator, there isn't much appetite to go back to this on the leadership. Are you finding any currency, any pickup for your legislation?
I think we're dumber than dirt if we don't try again, because if you think you can go home as a Republican and say, well, we gave it our best shot, you have not. The block grant approach hasn't even been tried. The bottom line here is that the Republican governors are getting very excited about having a block grant sent back to them to replace Obamacare to get the money and power out of Washington. We got to September the 30th. I met with a parliamentarian. I'm excited. We'll have more flexibility under the block grant than people envisioned. So if the governors come out for the block grant, then I think the president will fall in line. He doesn't want to quit So you cannot tell the Republican base or the country at large that we've taken our best shot at replacing Obamacare, because we have not.
Well, and you have until that September 30 reference was to when the reconciliation process ends, and you have the ability before that date to pass something with 50 votes. But that means 50 votes. And that, what about your friend John McCain? He's the one who cast the decisive vote against the last reform. Is he going to be on board for this?
I've talked to John several times. His governor is in charge of the formula. 4 states under Obamacare get 40% of the money. They're 20% of the population. So Arizona does very well under the block grant. Governor Ducey is working on the formula. Governor Scott Walker has been the intellectual heft here of trying to get the governors on board. So I think John would be very open-minded to a block grant. Let's put it through the committee process, then bring it to the floor. You can do this in a matter of days. So if the Republican governors come out in force for a block grant approach to replacing Obamacare, the president gets behind the governors, we're back into the ball game. And I think, yes, John McCain would be open to a new policy with a new process, and I think we can get 50 votes. And as a matter of fact, I think we'll get more than 50 votes. West Virginia gets 43% increase under my block grant approach. You had the governor switch parties. Joe Manchin's a fine fella. Joe, I think, would go along with the idea of giving West Virginia more money and more power.
All right. Thank you, Senator Graham. We'll follow, see how this goes.
Yeah, absolutely.
When we come back, John Kelly,